Chapter 4. Three Fools Chatting at Juyang Temple. Things got wild after that. Over the next 100 years, 17 brides went missing in the Mount Yujun area. A spooky legend took hold. A ghost bridegroom lived in the mountain, snatching women during their weddings and feasting on their families. This whole situation was pretty wild. Sure, there were 17 missing brides, but thousands of others had their weddings without a hitch. People were hesitant to throw big weddings in the area. But then there was the 17th bride, whose dad was a big deal. He really loved his daughter, and hearing about the legend, he handpicked 40 brave military guys to escort her to her groom. Even with all his efforts, his daughter vanished. The ghost bridegroom stirred up a real mess. This official couldn't find anyone to help, so he teamed up with his government buddies and went all out with a ritual. He even opened the granary to feed the poor, making enough noise to finally catch a heavenly official's attention. Jalian said, "That's pretty much the big picture." The two martial gods looked pretty uncooperative, so he wasn't sure if they were even listening. But surprisingly, Nanfeng lifted his head and frowned, asking, "Do the missing brides have anything in common?" Yilian said, "There were rich and poor brides, pretty and not so pretty. No clue what this ghost bridegroom likes." Nanfeng grunted, taking a sip of his tea as he seemed to think things over. Meanwhile, Fu Yao didn't even touch the tea Jalian offered. He kept wiping his fingers with a handkerchief and asked casually, "Your Highness, how can you be sure it's a bridegroom? No one's ever seen it, right?" Jalian smiled and replied, "The conclusion on this scroll is from the heavenly officials at Ling Wen's palace hall. The ghost bridegroom is just what people call it. But you've got a point." After their chat, Zelian realized these martial gods were sharp thinkers. Even though they looked serious, they were taking their work seriously, which made him feel good. As the sky darkened, they left the tea house, but when Zelian put on his bamboo hat and started walking, he noticed the two weren't following. Confused, he turned around and saw them staring at him in surprise. "Where are you going?" Nanfeng asked. Jalian said, "I'm off to find a place to crash." "Fu Yao, what's with the eye rolling again?" Nanfeng looked puzzled and asked, "But why are you heading towards the mountains and wilderness?" Ji Lian was used to roughing it. Just give him a piece of cloth and he could make it work for a night. He was thinking about finding a cave and lighting a fire, which was pretty standard for him. Then it hit him. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were martial gods from their own palace halls. Why sleep outside when they had options, right? Before long, the trio stumbled upon a rundown local shrine tucked away in a tiny corner. The incense plate was cracked, and the whole place felt like it hadn't seen visitors in ages. The earth god's name was carved into a little stone plaque. Jilian called out a few times, and it had been years since anyone had made an offering or even called his name. When the earth god finally heard someone, his eyes widened in surprise. Startled, the earth god stammered, "Do the three heavenly officials have any orders for me?" Shilin nodded and said, "No orders, just wondering if there are any General Nanyang or General Xuanzhen temples around here." About 5 li from here, there's a temple for General Nanyang. Shilin pressed his hands together and replied, "Thanks a lot." The earth god felt dazzled by the divine light around them and quickly hid again. Meanwhile, Jilian fished out some coins for an offering and noticed some scattered incense sticks. He straightened them up and lit them. Fu Yao rolled his eyes so much that Jilian almost asked if he needed a break. They finally spotted a temple just 5 li down the road. It was right there by the roadside, looking pretty popular and lively. Even though it was on the smaller side, it had everything you could need. The place was buzzing with excitement and chatter as people came and went. The three of them decided to hide a bit before sneaking inside. Sure enough, on the altar was a statue of the armored Nanyang martial god holding a bow. Yilian couldn't help but think, when he saw it. For a small countryside temple, the statue and its paint job were pretty rough around the edges. It looked nothing like Jilian's impression of Feng Xin. Most heavenly officials were used to their statues being a bit off. Sometimes even their own mothers wouldn't recognize them. There were some heavenly officials who couldn't even tell their own statues apart. You had to rely on the statue's pose, weapon, and outfit to figure out who it was meant to represent. Typically, the richer the area, the better the statues looked. In poorer places, the artist's skills often fell short, leading to some pretty tragic depictions. Why? Because he cared. Whenever he saw an ugly statue of himself, he'd quietly break it and have the artist redo it. Sometimes he'd even send a dream to express his dissatisfaction. So, believers learned pretty quickly that they needed to make a good-looking statue of their master. The folks at Xuanzhen Palace were just as detail-oriented as their general. As they entered the Nanyang Temple, Fu Yao couldn't help but critique the statue. He pointed out everything wrong with it: the shape, the colors, the technique. Shi Lian noticed Nanfeng's forehead starting to bulge with frustration, so he quickly looked for a new topic. Just then, he spotted a young lady kneeling to pay her respects to Nan Yang. He decided to break the tension, saying, "You know, it's surprising how strong the incense for Nan Yang is up north, considering his home ground is in the southeast." When mortals built temples, they were really just trying to mimic the grand palace halls up in the heavens. The statues of the gods? They were meant to reflect the heavenly officials themselves. The believers gathered at these temples, lighting incense that became a vital source of spiritual power for these divine beings. Now, here's the thing. Depending on where you lived, your history, and even your social customs, folks in different areas worshipped different heavenly officials. Each deity had the most powerful presence on their home turf, kind of like a home field advantage. But then there's the martial god Heavenly Emperor, who's a whole different story. He's got followers everywhere, with temples popping up in every direction. So whether Junwu was on his home ground or not didn't really matter. Nanfeng should have felt proud seeing all that incense burning at a temple outside his general's domain. But honestly, his face didn't look too happy about it. Fu Yao, standing nearby, couldn't help but smile and say, "Not bad at all. General Nan Yang sure gets a lot of love and respect." Xie Lian chimed in. "I have a question, but..." Before he could finish, Nan Feng interrupted. "If you're thinking, is it okay to ask? Then just skip it." Xie Lian thought to himself, "No, I was going to say, I'm not sure anyone can answer it." He had a feeling that whatever he asked wouldn't lead to a great answer, so he decided to change the subject. But Fu Yao, being all casual, jumped in with, "I know what you're curious about. You're wondering why there are so many women here today, right?" That was exactly what Xie Lian wanted to ask. You see, a martial god usually has fewer female followers than male ones. But Xie Lian was the exception 800 years ago, and the reason was pretty simple. He was good-looking. It wasn't about virtue or talent. It was all about those stunning statues and beautiful temples built by the imperial household. His statues were crafted by top artists, capturing his real face perfectly, and because of his saying, "Body in the abyss, but heart in paradise," they loved adding flowers to his statues. His temples turned into blooming havens, earning him the nickname Flower Crown Martial God. No wonder women flocked to see him. Normal martial gods usually give off this intense vibe, right? Their statues often look serious, fierce, or even a bit cold. Female worshippers typically prefer the goddess of mercy, Guan Yin, over those intimidating figures. Now, the statue of Nan Yang isn't exactly scary, but let's be real, it's not winning any beauty contests either. Still, oddly enough, more women come to pay their respects to Nan Yang than men do. It was clear that Nan Feng wasn't keen on answering any questions, which felt a bit strange to Xie Lian. Just then, a young girl finished her homage and turned to light some incense. When Xie Lian saw her turn, he gently nudged the two others with him. They weren't resistant to looking, but once they did, their faces changed in an instant. Fu Yao blurted out, "That's so ugly!" Xie Lian nearly choked, quickly saying, "Come on, Fu Yao, you can't say that about a girl." But honestly, Fu Yao wasn't wrong. The girl's face was so flat it looked like someone had pressed it down. If you called her features mediocre, That would be an insult to mediocrity. Describing her would probably involve terms like crooked nose and slanted eyes. Xie Lian wasn't judging her looks, though. The real issue was the giant hole in the back of her skirt. It was hard to pretend they hadn't seen it. Fu Yao was shocked at first, but then collected himself while Nanfeng's forehead relaxed. Seeing their reactions, Xie Lian quickly said, "Don't worry, don't worry." The girl knelt down again, totally focused on her prayers, saying, "Protect us, General Nan Yang." Female believer Little Ying prays that the ghost bridegroom will be caught soon. Don't let innocent people suffer. She was so sincere, completely unaware of the hole in her skirt or the three guys crouching at the foot of the statue. Xie Lian felt a headache coming on. What do we do? That tear looked like it was made by something sharp, and Xie Lian feared she'd be humiliated if people saw her. Fu Yao shrugged. "Don't look at me. The one she's worshipping isn't my General Xuanzhen. I didn't see any harassment." Meanwhile, Nan Yang was looking pretty pale, caught between anger and frustration. He waved his hands around but couldn't find the words. It was clear he was no help at all. So, Xie Lian had to take matters into his own hands. After a moment of thought, he took off his outer robe and let it float over to the young girl, covering the embarrassing tear in her skirt. With that little act, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But that gust of wind startled the girl, making her look around like she was searching for answers. She took off the robe, hesitated, then placed it on the statue's pedestal, completely oblivious to her predicament. As her incense finished burning, she got ready to leave. Xie Lian worried that if she walked out like that, she might never show her face again out of shame. Looking at Nan Feng and Fu Yao, who were stiff as boards and utterly useless, he sighed. They barely noticed when Xie Lian shifted into a form visible to mortals and jumped down. The temple lights weren't dim, but they didn't do much to clear the air. As Xie Lian landed, another gust of wind made the candle flames flicker. Little Ying, the girl, blinked and suddenly saw a man appear from the shadows, his upper body bare. When he reached out to her, she practically jumped out of her skin. "Of course," she shrieked. Just as Xie Lian was about to say something reassuring, she instinctively slapped him and yelled, "Ah, harassment!" Smack! The sound echoed in the temple. Nan Feng and Fu Yao, still crouched by the statue, twitched in unison at the sharp noise. Len took the slap without a hint of annoyance. He quickly handed over his robe and whispered a few words. The girl's eyes widened in shock. When she felt the back of her skirt, her face turned beet red, tears welling up in her eyes. It was hard to tell if she was mad or embarrassed, but she clutched the robe tightly and bolted out of the temple. Now, only Xie Lian remained in the empty space, feeling a chill as a cool breeze swept through. Rubbing his face, he turned to the other two little gods and said, "All right, everything's cool now." Just then, Nan Feng pointed at him and asked, "Hey, did your wound open?" Xie Lian looked down and exclaimed, "Oh." Beneath his robe, his skin was pale as jade, but his chest was wrapped tightly in layers of white cloth with bandages covering his neck and wrists. Tiny wounds peeked out from under the edges, creating a shocking sight. Xie Lian thought his sprained neck was good to go, so he started unwrapping his bandages. Fu Yao shot him a curious look and asked, "Who did you fight?" Xie Lian replied, "Fight? No one." Nan Feng chimed in, "Then what about those wounds?" Xie Lian quickly explained, "I just fell." Those injuries were from rolling down from the heavens, not from a fight. Fu Yao mumbled something under his breath, probably not flattering, but Xie Lian ignored it and kept unwrapping. As soon as he finished, Nan Feng and Fu Yao's eyes locked onto his neck, where a black collar was snugly wrapped around his pale skin.